"You're terminated, Ms. Langford. Effective immediately." The words didn't echo. They detonated. Right there in the Hilton Conference Center in Atlanta, between the Caesar salad buffet and the branded coffee mugs no one wanted, the CEO's voice slid through the PA system like grease on a glass floor. Polished, icy, rehearsed. Michelle Langford's question hadn't even finished traveling through the microphone when it happened. "Could you clarify why the internal sustainability audit from Q1 2023 never appeared in the compliance summary, even though legal confirmed it was received?" Boom. That was it. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't made a scene, just stood calmly, legal pad in hand, and read a question she'd been holding on to for months. The question had bite, but so did Michelle. Or at least she thought she used to. Now she stood there frozen, a 59-year-old risk analyst clutching a pad of notes like it might deflect shame. 1,000 blinking eyes, 1,000 murmured whispers. Someone cleared their throat. Someone chuckled. "And let this be a reminder," the CEO said with theatrical concern. "We welcome curiosity, but not chaos." The room froze like a taxidermy exhibit. Security didn't touch her, but they loomed. Michelle walked, legs stiff, face flushed, past linen napkins and her director's shell-shocked expression, past 2 interns pretending their phones weren't recording. Her heel slipped slightly on the marble as she reached the lobby. For a moment, she considered turning around, saying something brave, something final. But her voice had slipped somewhere under her shoes. Then, footsteps. Behind her. Measured, expensive. "Ms. Langford." She turned slowly, automatically. It wasn't security. It was Malcolm Varelli, the investor no one ever saw in public. He rarely spoke during earnings calls, but when he did, stock markets held their breath. He stood just a foot away. No tie. Dark suit. Eyes like iced espresso. "Would you?" he asked quietly. "Mind repeating that question for me?" Michelle blinked. Her mouth opened, but her brain, still reeling from the slap of sudden erasure, tripped over itself. The compliance audit. Q1. It was submitted, but..." Malcolm nodded. Once. No smile, no comment. Just a nod. Like a gavel. Then he turned and walked straight back into the conference room like nothing had happened. And that's when Michelle felt it. Just beneath the shame, behind the electric static still buzzing in her ears, something flickered. Not pride. Not yet. But something far more dangerous to the people who underestimated her. It was the opposite of defeat. The kind of pulse you feel in your chest before a storm rolls in, and for the first time all day she didn't want to run. She wanted to stand in it, let it hit her full force. And if you're still with me, not just folding laundry while this mess unspools, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 10,000 of you beautiful chaos lovers so I can keep dragging these boardroom villains into the light. Don't make me beg like a vice president at a diversity training he's pretending to understand. Michelle stepped out of the Hilton into a hazy April afternoon in Atlanta. Jobless, scandal-drenched, and vaguely radioactive. She didn't even reach her car before her work email died mid-scroll. Just a soft authentication error and a spinning wheel of doom. No message, no next steps. They weren't just firing her, they were erasing her. Michelle didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in the blazer she wore to the investor forum, staring blankly at her beige bedroom wall like it might give her a reason. Her laptop hummed beside her in the dark, Slack tab blinking, not authorized. Her inbox frozen. Her last message to her manager unread, like a ghost trapped in code. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the CEO's smug grin. Heard how he weaponized the word disruptive, like she'd set fire to the building, not asked about a buried audit. By 3:12 a.m., she'd spiralized. Resume ruined, reputation tainted, likely branded unstable in HR's secret playbook. Then it came. A ping, LinkedIn, new request, no photo, name, Travis B. Headline, independent risk consultant, no job history, one connection, one message. Saw what they did to you. You were right. Her fingers hovered. Delete? Block? But something deep in her spine whispered, look closer. She clicked accept. The profile vanished instantly. User no longer exists. Then her phone buzzed again. New app. Duo authentication failed. Another buzz. She tried the backup path, the employee wiki. This account has been deactivated. A chill spread through her. This wasn't unemployment, it was erasure. Systematic. Total. Like the files she'd built, the flagged reports she'd submitted, and the warnings she'd documented, Michelle knew they were pretending it had all vanished. But she also knew better. She shoved her laptop aside and reached beneath her dresser, pulling out an old Western digital external drive coated in dust. Still had the faded Langford watchdog sticker from her cubicle back at the Peachtree Tower office in Atlanta. She plugged it in. A whir, a beep, then a blinking light, and suddenly a dozen folders bloomed onto her screen like forgotten fossils. Vendor, Sustainability, Q1 2023, Temp Reporting. Overrides, Legal Review V4 Final, buried deep under nested folders, beneath stale memos and archived training decks, was her trail. Not everything, no. But enough to remind her she wasn't losing her grip. That audit had existed. She had submitted it. She had the timestamp metadata. And now she had motive. Michelle began sorting, copying, labeling, every oddity in the carbon offset estimates, every override that magically benefited preferred vendors. Every time legal replied with "not our jurisdiction," she even found an old Slack PDF where a junior compliance analyst had typed, "Are we supposed to delete this?" And her manager had responded with a rain cloud emoji. If you believe one question can shake an empire, hit that subscribe button, because the next part of the story is just getting started. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. At 5:42 a.m., Michelle poured herself black coffee from her chipped Risk Happens mug and stared at the growing archive she'd renamed, "If I go down, you come too." This wasn't damage control anymore. It was evidence. It was war preparation. They hadn't just terminated her. They were trying to ghost her entirely. Scrub her from the system like she never worked there. But Michelle Langford had something they didn't. A photographic memory and the receipts to match. The message didn't come through Gmail. It came through Proton Mail. Subject, "You don't know me, but I know that report." Her fingers hovered above the mouse, sleeves still damp with yesterday's panic sweat. She clicked. "I used to be internal audit. Left before the 2022 downsizing. My choice. I saw your name in the metadata of a deleted file. You were right to ask about it. Someone buried it intentionally." Attached, a heavily redacted screenshot of a buried file directory. At the bottom, a file name. InVcomp Twouchart Langford Schauchart sub Q1 final v3.pdf. She didn't need a decoder. That was her file, her initials, her fight, and now someone else had seen it. Possible internal override, please advise. Michelle had flagged the audit with that exact line and heard nothing back. Until now. She stared at the screenshot. One timestamp stood out. Her compliance report had been marked as archived less than 48 hours after submission. Not reviewed, not escalated, just buried. Archived, the corporate equivalent of shoving it into a digital broom closet and pretending it never existed. Michelle's pulse pounded, but her hands stayed steady. That's what fury does. It scorches the fear out of you and leaves behind something sharper. Then another message popped up. "Do you have more?" She didn't reply. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. She recognized the number before it even lit up. Jared from logistics. They'd shared dozens of quiet lunches on the second floor, swapping crossword clues and mocking the thermostat war between accounting and HR. Kind, reserved. Definitely not the kind of guy to risk calling her now. His voice was low, tense. I probably shouldn't be calling, but HR's already spreading stuff. That you were under stress. That maybe you snapped. Michelle said nothing, but her throat burned. He continued. Lisa, my manager, said HR flagged you weeks ago. Words like instability, behavior changes. Michelle laughed, a dry, stunned bark. They're saying I made it up. Jared hesitated, then added, I think that's where they're heading. Her voice tightened like piano wire. Tell Lisa the only unstable thing about me is how many damn copies I made of that report. She hung up. The smear campaign had begun. Fast, aggressive, classic. Make the woman look erratic. Weaponize mental health. Corporate gaslighting 101. Michelle opened a new document and titled it, Disinformation Tracking. She recorded every call, every whisper, every sudden silence. She even screen recorded Jared's voicemail and narrated the timestamp as she went. Tuesday, 8:13 a.m. Jared from Logistics confirms HR is circulating mental health claims. If they wanted to brand her unbalanced, she'd show them just how precisely unstable she could be. Then her Proton Mail inbox blinked again. There are more of us. We're watching how they react. You're not alone. Michelle didn't smile. Not yet. But for the first time since walking out of the Hilton Conference Center, she felt something even more potent than rage. Fuel. 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted. Just long enough for Michelle to question whether anyone still believed her. She was about to find out. Long enough for the caffeine to stop working and the adrenaline to congeal into something dull, like old gum stuck under the edge of her desk. Malcolm Varelli hadn't called. No texts, no lawyers, no cryptic messages through LinkedIn or burner Proton Mail. For all Michelle knew, his quiet nod outside that conference room in Atlanta was nothing more than an aging billionaire's reflex. Some silent gesture of pity for the woman unraveling next to the Hilton coat check. She began to doubt, to shrink. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe that nod was the corporate version of clapping for a nervous kid who forgot their lines in the high school play. Harmless, forgettable, empty. She sat at her kitchen table labeling PDFs for yet another encrypted backup folder. Evidence 3/redacted/ if they sue me/ then the call came in. Cleveland, area code. She almost let it go to voicemail, but habit, and a little boredom, pushed her thumb forward. Michelle Langford, she answered, cautious. A woman's voice, crisp, professional, but not cold. This is Kayla Arment with the Daily Ledger. Michelle's heart jumped. You've probably seen our name tied to the recent investor reaction. I haven't, Michelle lied. Kayla got straight to it. Would you like to make a comment about your whistleblower status? Michelle froze. My what? We're publishing a piece. One of your company's lead investors, Malcolm Varelli, made a comment on the shareholder call. He called you, quote, an individual with moral clarity who raised questions the board refused to answer. Michelle's mouth went dry. He didn't elaborate, Kayla continued. Didn't go on record beyond that. But he named you. It's soft, but it's public. Michelle turned toward the wall behind her, where pastel sticky notes were taped in a spiral, a mix of data points, file names, and dates. It looked less like an evidence board now and more like a nervous breakdown in stationary form. So, I'm asking again, Kayla said. Were you terminated in retaliation for whistleblowing? Michelle hesitated. Is that what I'm calling it now? A whistleblower? The word sounded clinical. tidy, as if what she'd been through came with pamphlets and HR brochures, not like locked servers, not like whispered rumors of instability, not like watching truth vanish in silence. But Malcolm had said it, not her. He put her name in the fire. "I guess that depends how you define it," she finally replied. Kayla smiled through the line. "We'll call that a pending comment. We publish tomorrow." Michelle hung up without saying goodbye. This time, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like confirmation. Malcolm had heard her. He believed her. He hadn't called again because he didn't need to. He'd already moved the first piece. And now she was one of them. A piece on the board. Her phone buzzed. Twitter. Moral clarity was trending in Georgia. Buzz. Again. Signal. Unknown number. They're scared now. Be smart. They'll try to spin it. Attached. She opened the file. A screenshot. Slack chat. Senior Compliance Officer. Her name circled. Below it, one line. Containment strategy needs to begin before Langford builds momentum. Michelle leaned back in her chair, heart steady now. This wasn't just her fight anymore. She was a symbol, a signal, and every player in the game was watching. The company, the board, the shareholders, the media, and Malcolm. He didn't need to protect her. He was waiting to see what she'd do. Michelle was halfway through her third rewatch of the shareholder meeting. Her voice calm, composed, right before the CEO butchered her name live, when it hit her. Not an epiphany, a password. ColdStack192. A throwaway login she used back when they'd transitioned their archival system to an off-site server in early 2021. Temporary, redundant, supposedly decommissioned when the shiny new SAS compliance portal rolled in and buried everything beneath auto-deletes and access firewalls. But she remembered it. She hadn't used it in over 2 years, not since she backed up her notes from the 2021 Southeast Energy Summit, the one the project manager kept accidentally erasing from the shared drive because the findings didn't align with PR's talking points. Michelle typed it in. To her shock, the ColdStack archive still lived. Outdated UI, file trees that looked like digital fossils, a font that screamed Windows XP on a bad day. But it was live. And inside, everything. Drafts of Q1 and Q2 reports that never made it past internal review. Emails debating whether carbon offsets could be forecasted creatively. One legal memo actually said, "If we don't acknowledge the discrepancy, it doesn't exist." Then came the jackpot. Buried deep. A deleted compliance summary. Q1. Dated 6 months after Michelle's original report had been buried, and her initials were still in the metadata. Someone had pulled Michelle's original findings, stripped her name, and rewrote them into a soft, sanitized warning. Data synchronization issues prevented complete environmental review during Q1. In corporate speak? Oops, the files vanished. Wink, wink. They hadn't buried the truth. They'd rebranded it. Michelle stared at her screen, each browser tab a different type of liability. This wasn't about a single audit anymore. It was a pattern. A systemic conversion of non-compliance into polished PR. She zipped the files, renamed the folder Shareholder Packet, A/confidential source 001/next. She created a burner Proton Mail account. Then pulled up an old mailing list her ex, Derek, the cynical finance analyst, once showed her, chuckling. These guys will click anything with the word divestiture. At 2:39 a.m., she hit send. Subject line, review immediately, compliance concerns, TriWest Holdings. Then she waited, not long. By 7:15 a.m., Slack at TriWest lit up like a Christmas tree on Red Bull. Someone in IT leaked a screenshot. Why is the ColdStack server active? Was this an authorized restore? Delete the backups now. Who sent this to the investors? The CEO wasn't tagged, but legal was. And then someone made the fatal error of typing the word whistleblower in an open channel. HR tried to purge the thread. Too late. Another employee screenshotted it and sent it to Michelle through a burner Reddit account. "You're not alone." Michelle leaned back in her chair. For the first time, she wasn't reacting. She was orchestrating. And buried in that packet she'd sent, one slide in particular was designed to set off alarms, adjusted offsets. The spreadsheet referenced a third-party vendor claiming to plant trees to offset carbon emissions. But Michelle had already run the numbers. The trees didn't exist. The carbon credits were fictional, a scam disguised as sustainability. And she wasn't done. She'd only sent one packet. There were 4 more, each with sharper teeth. This wasn't about burning bridges anymore. Michelle was lighting them from both ends. She barely had time to finish her cereal, dry because optimism felt too expensive for milk, when her Proton mail pinged. Subject: "You're not the only one they erased." Inside, a scanned NDA, redacted signatures, a timestamp from the peak of Tri-West's 2022 strategic reorg. One line of text: "I was in data audit. They paid me to leave. Not to forget. If you leak this, don't say my name, but keep swinging." That was all the message said. Then came the attachment. Michelle opened it, another document scraped from the same buried compliance server she'd accessed through ColdStack. A memo. Dense, formal, written in the kind of risk management code only insiders could decode. But Michelle could read it like sheet music. The memo detailed temporary overrides of key financial flags during quarterly reporting, marked strictly for internal audience. In plain terms, they'd been reclassifying vendor reimbursements as carbon offsets. They weren't going green. They were turning refund requests into fake eco-points. By the time she switched to Signal, her pulse was pounding like a snare drum. New message. No text, just an upload. USB Financial Archive Final/EBC. Michelle froze. She recognized the acronym immediately. Executive Blind Copy. EBCs were curated, sanitized summaries distributed only to the C-suite. She used to prepare them, carefully scrubbed of anything that might cause panic upstairs. But this file? Not sanitized. She opened it. It included side spreadsheets labeled discretionary logistics allocations, which sounded routine until she started cross-referencing vendors. Private jets, luxury resorts, rental cars in cities with no offices, passenger lists labeled guest, and then one name stopped her cold. Alyssa Merritt, the CEO's daughter. 3 trips to Lake Como, 1 to Bora Bora. Billed under vendor relations. One entry even read, organic catering, altitude-sourced menu. Michelle nearly choked on a spoonful of cereal. By noon, a third message arrived, this one encrypted voice. The kind of tech only whistleblowers or panicked Silicon Valley execs used at 3 a.m. The voice was calm, masked. "We met at the 23 ethics offsite," it said. "Legal division. I stayed quiet. I have kids in private school. But your file stirred the hive." A pause. Then, "The board is scrambling." And there's more. "Look up Agrishare Transfer Memo V4. You'll know when you see it." Another pause. "Oh, and by the way, nice touch with the packet title. Bold." Click. Michelle opened a new document, labeled it Incoming Leads, verified. She began tagging names, linking data, cataloging evidence. Her desktop looked like a prosecutor's dream or a corporate nightmare. Still, one sentence from her first anonymous contact stayed with her like a pulse. "You were right to ask. You were right to ask about it." That line echoed through Michelle Langford's thoughts like a steady drumbeat. All of this, every leak, every whisper, because she dared to ask one question. A mid-level risk analyst, age 59, booted from TriWest Holdings for being inconvenient. They forgot she color-coded corruption. They forgot she saved everything. Now her focus was razor-sharp. No panic. No second-guessing. This wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about exposure. Because people like Michelle don't chase revenge. They bring receipts. Then came the company's official memo, a masterclass in corporate gaslighting, marinated in HR language and printed on stationery that probably cost more than Michelle's monthly mortgage. Subject: regarding recent media activity by former employee M. Langford. It started gently with a throat-clearing phrase, as you may have seen in recent headlines. Then it twisted. Michelle was described as emotionally compromised and possibly acting from personal grievance. But the worst? Patterns of instability during her final weeks of employment. There was no signature, just Office of the CEO. But everyone knew who wrote it. The message was unmistakable. Discredit the woman. Smear her. Make her look unhinged. What they didn't anticipate? The memo leaked. Within 3 hours, screenshots flooded Reddit threads under the title, CEO Gaslights Ex-Employee Gets Ratioed. By evening, it hit LinkedIn. Executives were liking and unliking it so fast, it looked like a heart monitor mid-arrest. And that's when Malcolm Varelli made his move. Not in a press release, not on social media, but through the kind of back-channel whisper chain Michelle had come to trust. He'd requested a private board session. Emergency topic. Leadership credibility review. No PR, no formal agenda, no minutes. The same afternoon, a press conference meant to debut TriWest's Sustainability Vision 2030 was quietly erased from the website. No announcement. But everyone knew the timing wasn't coincidence. And Michelle? She was ready. She had held back one final card, the one she swore she'd only release if they tried to stain her name. They had. So she gave the internet a gift, a small file drop, 3-page PDF. Subject line, Executive Disbursement Report, internal use only. TriWest Logistics Disbursement Trail. V1 inside. Payment transfers from a holding account in Delaware to a cluster of flagged offshore entities in St. Kitts and Nevis. Accompanying invoices issued by TriWest Logistics. Michelle knew the name well. It was a shell company. No employees, no office, no tax ID until 3 months after the first transfer. The final page hit like a hammer. An approval chain. Names, titles, initials. The CFO, the CEO. Michelle included no commentary, no preamble, no spin, just the data. She uploaded the file to a transparency watchdog forum using the anonymous handle. Langford was here. Then she closed her laptop and poured herself a drink. A small batch bourbon she would have never splurged on back when she worked for them. 6 hours later, it was everywhere. Reddit threads. Substacks. Finance Twitter lit up like a Christmas tree in July. Is TriWest the new Theranos? Fake offsets? Offshore flows? How deep does this go? Who is Michelle Langford? She wasn't wrong. She was just early. Malcolm Varelli's silence became deafening. Because the twist wasn't that Michelle had been right. The twist was that her question, the one that got her fired, wasn't even the scandal. It was just the doorway. They hadn't built their empire on clean data and environmental innovation. They'd built it on fake trees and funneled cash. Michelle didn't feel proud or victorious. She felt clear, because it had never been about her. They tried to turn her into the story, a distraction, a scapegoat, a cautionary tale for asking too much. But the story had taken on a life of its own. Now it had a heartbeat. It was systemic. The boardroom on the 41st floor of TriWest's downtown Atlanta tower wasn't made for conflict. It was made for theater. Mahogany table, leather chairs, frosted glass. The illusion of control. But when Malcolm Varelli walked in that morning, everything changed. No entourage, no PR, just Malcolm, and a manila folder under one arm. Like a surgeon walking in with test results you already knew were bad. He sat without waiting. No greetings, no handshakes. He slid the folder across the table and said calmly, "This is the only question that matters." The room stilled. The chairman blinked. The CEO opened his mouth. Malcolm raised a hand. No spin, no marketing, no script. Just answer the question. The page inside the manila folder was stark. One line, printed in 14-point calibri. Can you explain why the environmental compliance audit from Q1 2023, submitted by M. Langford and confirmed as received by legal, was never included in board review materials or financial disclosures? Silence. No one moved. Malcolm Varelli tapped one finger against the edge of the boardroom table. "If you can't answer this by end of day," he said flatly, "I'll call for a motion to suspend the CEO and CFO pending independent audit." He paused. "And I won't be the only one." He stood, smoothed the front of his jacket. Then came the gut punch. Another investor entered, then another, each holding the same sheet of paper. No shouting, no chest-puffing speeches, just presence. The message was clear. This wasn't Malcolm going rogue. It was the start of a coalition. Meanwhile, Michelle Langford sat on her living room couch in Decatur, a faint coffee ring bleeding into the edge of her favorite legal pad. A cat she didn't own had adopted her feet. She hadn't opened her blinds in 2 days. Still, the room was bright, partly from the morning sun, mostly from the cold blue glow of incoming pings and alerts. Then came the knock. She opened the door. A courier stood there, manila envelope in hand. "Michelle Langford?" She nodded. He handed it off and backed away like it was radioactive. She opened it. "Cease and desist. Unauthorized disclosure." The letterhead was crooked. The body text, a boilerplate mashup of legal threats and lazy formatting. The cherry on top? They spelled her name, Michael. She laughed. A sharp, startled bark that sent the cat under the couch. They were panicking. She could feel it in the sloppiness. The copy-pasted threats. The dollar store intimidation. She folded the letter, tucked it beneath her coffee mug. Then she opened her laptop. Waiting in her drafts. Tri-West response, summary, final brief for Varelli. But it wasn't just for Malcolm anymore. It was for every investor tired of fairy tale quarterly reports. Every employee still DMing her screenshots. Every outsider watching this slow-motion collapse. Michelle didn't feel rage. She felt precision. And as the pressure built at Tri-West Tower, the question rang louder than ever. Why was the report buried? Tick, tock, boom. The emergency shareholder meeting wasn't live-streamed. No press, no glossy pamphlets or recycled mission statements projected behind executives sipping cucumber water. Instead, it took place in a windowless beige conference room inside a private investment firm in downtown Atlanta. No cameras, no press releases, just quiet shareholders with serious money and colder eyes. And yet, someone cracked the silence. An intern, maybe. An assistant. Somebody who understood what was coming. Michelle Langford found the link buried in her inbox at 9:57 a.m., subject line. "If you're going to watch history, wear something comfy." She clicked. There it was. Malcolm Varelli seated at the center of a U-shaped table, holding the same single page he had carried into the boardroom days earlier. The room fell still as he cleared his throat. He read aloud. "Can you explain why the environmental compliance audit from Q1 2023, submitted by M. Langford and confirmed by legal, was never included in board review materials or financial disclosures?" Silence. The CEO, suddenly very human, licked his lips. One board member shifted. Another flipped pages they'd already read. Then a voice from the right. "I move to vote. Another followed. Seconded. Malcolm didn't smile, didn't blink. Motion is now active. The video feed zoomed out. Hands went up, hesitant at first. Then all at once. Michelle sat frozen, one hand over her mouth, watching the screen flicker with the weight of 1,000 consequences. The vote passed, almost unanimously. Suspend the CEO and CFO effective immediately. Freeze all executive compensation. Full investigation into offshore transfers and false sustainability claims. Then one final note. Malcolm stood. One more motion, he said. A groan. He ignored it. I move to establish an independent ethics committee reporting directly to shareholders, chaired on a rotating basis. First term goes to the only person in this room who had the courage to ask the right question. He turned, faced the camera. Michelle Langford. Michelle dropped her coffee. Her screen glitched. The feed froze on the CEO's face, eyes hollow, expression crumbling like a bad alibi. Malcolm sat down. The room didn't clap. That's not how real power moves. It just settled, like dust after demolition. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done, what you've been through, or just say Michelle Langford wasn't alone. Your words matter more than you think. And if this story hit a nerve, use it. Speak up when something feels off. Document everything. Ask the uncomfortable question, even if it costs.